village, including the chief, is required to abide by it. That is the traditional African way of reaching decisions. And now get this. There are two ways by which you can take democratic decisions. One, the Western way, is by majority vote. You ask how many people are for a certain particular motion. All those who are in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand. And then you can count. That is a transparent, efficient, and fast way of making a decision, a democratic decision. But it has a downside. The downside is that it can ignore minority positions. The other way by which you can reach a democratic decision is by consensus. Consensus means that you take all minority positions into account. Now the advantage here is that once you come to a consensus, you can be sure that everybody will go along with that decision because their views have already been taken into account. But that has a downside. And the downside is the larger the number of people, the awfully long time it takes to reach a consensus. And this is why in traditional Africa, it takes our elders and the chiefs sometimes weeks and even months before they reach a consensus. But you should know this, just because there's no box with ballot written on it in an African village doesn't mean that Africans had no idea about the sense of democracy in Africa. Now this is what the leadership must be told in Africa. In other words, before the white man stepped foot on the continent, we were practicing our own form of democracy based upon consensus. It is called participatory democracy based upon consensus under our chiefs and kings. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because after independence, the leadership never built upon our own indigenous institutions. Now this is important because the Japanese didn't develop by rejecting their own culture. The Asians didn't develop by rejecting their own culture. Only we in Africa rejected ours. So the leaders went abroad and copied all sorts of foreign and alien systems to impose upon their people. They copied alien ideologies, for example, to impose upon our people. Even a fool could see that Marx and Lenin were not black Africans. Rome has a basilica, so too must we in Ivory Coast. The Soviet Union is a one-party state system, so too must we in Africa. France has an emperor, so Bocasso spent $25 million to crown himself Emperor Bocasso of Sicily. I can go on and on. But if you look at the continent is littered with the putrid carcasses of foreign systems that we imported into Africa. Enough copying.
Amen.
Africa's salvation lies in returning to and building upon its own indigenous institutions. The solutions to Africa's problems lie right there in Africa. It doesn't lie in the corridors of the World Bank, nor does it lie in the inner sanctum of the Soviet Presidium, nor does it lie on the landscapes of Jupiter. It lies in Africa. And that's where we have to find it. The leadership is fearless. Now, some time ago it was very difficult to admit this, but we can all see this. How do we bring about change in Africa? Or let's say Ethiopia, for example. And that is what I want to spend some time to talk about. Because the experience that we had in Ghana. Now remember that in Ghana between 1981 and 2000, we had a military-turned civilian dictator in Ghana, Gerald Lawrence. And we fought him relentlessly and was able to bring about change. And sometimes maybe the experience that we went through may be helpful to our Ethiopian brothers and sisters. One of the painful fact that we have to recognize is that I don't want to talk about, right now I don't want to talk about, Mele Zenawi, because look, he represents what I call a symbol of the truculent tale of betrayal in Africa. I mean, we railed against Mengistu. But like Africans will tell you, we struggle very hard to remove one cockroach from power. And then the next rat comes to do the same thing. What is that? That's what you're seeing. Now, we want to bring about, we in Ghana, the problem that we've had is that, the leadership haven't learned anything. I mean, look at Mugabe of Zimbabwe. Look at Gaddafi. Look at Paul Biya of Cameroon. I can go on and on. They keep on repeating the same stupid mistakes again and again and again. Now, we know that there's problems with our political system and our economic system. And we have to reform the abominable economic system and political system. Now remember that back in the 1980s, here we were marching down to South Africa to demand one vote for the blacks there. Which was fine. The blacks in South Africa needed to have one vote. But did you care to look at the rest of Africa in the 1980s? That we had de facto apartheid regimes. In Rwanda, we had a tribal apartheid system. In Burundi, we had a tribal apartheid system. And now we have the same tribal apartheid system in Ethiopia. Yeah. Now, we have the power to make change, but we have to exercise that power smartly. In other words, we want democracy in Africa. But to make democracy work in Africa, you need to have an intelligent opposition. Now, don't get me wrong. I know there are a lot of people, criticizing the opposition is like, I don't want people to think that criticizing the opposition is like pouring salt into their wounds. I know they've made a lot of personal sacrifices. But this is a friendly advice. We need to do much better in fighting. Because look, in 1990, there were only 4 democratic countries in Africa. Out of the 54, today we have only 16. So in other words, we have moved from 4 to 16 out of the 54 African countries. Which means that the vast majority of the African people still labor under tyranny and oppression. We've made some progress, but it is not enough. We can do things better. How? If we look at the opposition, first of all, remember this. According to Newton's law of physics, Newton's law of physics, for every force in nature, there is a counterforce. Now, a force dominates if the counterforce is weak or non-existent.